All right, let's get reaction from those affected by the revamp program. Joyce Reynolds is Executive Vice President for Restaurants Canada. Syed Hussain is with the Immigration Workers Alliance for Change. They're both joining us from Toronto. Welcome to you both. Joyce, I want to get your thoughts first. I'm taking it you're not very happy with these reforms. What's going to be the impact on your industry?
Well, there's been so much anxiety and concern, and we've been so looking forward to the end of the moratorium, but it doesn't feel like the moratorium has ended. We have an industry which is growing. We created more jobs than almost any other industry last year. We have our temporary foreign workers only represent 2% of our workforce, but they're a very critical percent of our workforce. And the reforms that have been introduced are going to make it cost prohibitive and inaccessible to most of those in areas of critical labor shortages.
Will restaurants close?
We will see some casualties, absolutely. We'll also see some Canadian workers who will be losing their jobs and losing shifts and losing hours as a result of this change. It means that anchor positions like short order cooks that can't be filled by Canadians, if those shifts are cut, that means every waitress and hostess and bartender, their hours and shifts are going to be cut as well. You're also going to see some major price increases if restaurants are forced to pay the provincial median wage, as the minister has suggested.
Okay, Mr. Hussain, I want to get your thoughts on migrant workers. What's your reaction? What's the impact on them from these changes today?
See, the most fundamental, the most critical problem with the current immigration system and the temporary foreign worker program is that migrant workers don't have full immigration status. That's what limits workers' rights at work. That's what makes it harder for people to assert their rights. That's what makes it easier for employers to exploit them. And that has not been resolved today. That hasn't been changed. What we've seen is a pitting of migrant workers against unemployed citizens at the same time as the immigration minister said it makes up a small part of the labor force. So it doesn't make any sense. What we needed to hear today was hire an immediate permanent immigration status for migrant workers.
If you presumably squeeze the number of jobs that are available for these workers, do you increase the possibility of abuse if they're even more desperate for the jobs they have, no matter how lousy the working conditions, Mr. Hussain?
Well, let's look at the fine print. So what the government is saying is it said that you can't actually change jobs within the same sector because there'll be fewer jobs within the sector. So now employers know that the worker is not going to be, as you know, I'm sure your viewers know this, if you know there's if there's actually no chance of getting another job, you won't leave the job you're in. And if the employer knows that just opens up a huge path for abuse. And the second part is, what the government has actually done is it's put a limit. It's put a limit on how long migrant workers can be in the country. So that's two problems. One, that's an expiry limit on your relationships. Then that's an expiry limit on how long you stay here, which is just unnatural and inhumane. But also, it creates a revolving door system. More and more workers will come into the country while another group will be kicked out. And so you aren't actually, what you're basically saying is we want insecure, impermanent, but constant workers to come into the country. So no, this isn't a solution. And this isn't about making just workers more desperate for jobs. It's about entrenching a revolving door immigration system that Kenny has actually put in place across the system.
Joyce Reynolds, I want to get back to you on the hospitality sector. The moratorium's lifted, as you pointed out, but in some cases that might actually be in place because of high unemployment. Is the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, not blamed for a lot of this? Because there were, as Mr. Kenny pointed out, common sense missing from a lot of the hiring equations that were going on out there. Clearly, foreign workers were just being used as a cheap labor resource when there was plenty of domestic alternatives. How do you think the industry responds to that allegation?
Well, in terms of the low-skilled workers, in the 6641 category, which is the catch-all for the lower-skilled workers in our industry, 94% of them are in Western Canada. And I want to say that I don't disagree with your panelist. Our industry was built by immigrants. immigrants who came to this country and worked their way up the ranks and are now owner-operators of multi-million-dollar businesses. What Minister Kenney was saying, we just want the very highly educated, highly skilled workers. Well, a lot of jobs are available for workers in the lower skilled areas. When you look at the job vacancy rates, we have the highest number, and our job vacancy rate is increasing the fastest. These jobs have to be filled. So we're saying to Minister Kenney, what is the strategy? What is the labor strategy? If these people can't be approved through the temporary or the provincial nominee program anymore. If they can't come in, they can't go through the provincial nominee program. Seems to me every access to these very important workers is being cut off.
Mr. Hussain, back to you for the final point here. Look a couple of years down the road. What is the impact of these policy changes on migrant workers? What will be happening out there in the real world?
I mean, what's happening is what's happening now. Workers are scared. Workers are unable to assert their rights. Workers are being pushed further into the margins. The entire immigration system is jerking towards this way. And I just want to echo what was said earlier, is that every viewer who's sitting here needs to know that what Kenny is basically saying is if you make less than, say, $21 an hour, if you're not quote-unquote highly educated, you're not welcome to the country. And if those people are in the country right now, if Kenny and Harper had their way, they'd be kicked out, right? So are we wanting to live in a country that is made up only of so-called highly skilled, highly educated, rich, mostly white people? Or is there, or do we want to fight for a system that will be full permanent residency and access for racialized people? I think that's the fundamental question that's been posed to us in these changes, and that's the one each of us needs to answer to.
Okay, interesting point. Thank you both. Appreciate your reaction to Mr. Kenney.